Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inspected Goals, the podcast where we try to improve our play through a more analytical approach. For the first time in 2 or 3 months that we're podcasting, because life's been a bit mad for me for a few different reasons and got a bit overwhelming, and we've all just been quite busy, so that's why we've not podcasted since, I think, early November, something like that, maybe even before then. But we're back, and I'm back with Ben, which is the perfect time to do a podcast with Ben. I assume you're a very busy man at the moment, Ben. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not normally very busy, but this week has been busy for me. I did another podcast yesterday, and now a podcast today, and then tonight I'll be focusing on my own team after spending the rest of the week looking at fixtures and spending all the time we're trying to work out permutations and stuff for other people.
I was going to say, it must be quite tricky because you're kind of the go-to guy in terms of fixtures. Do you get a lot of people just messaging you, asking you questions, and you constantly are saying to them, it depends on your team?
Yeah, I just actually just ignore the rate my team tools or the team specific questions that I get in messages because it's not a good use of my time to be answering that, and I can't like answer one person and then not answer another person. That wouldn't be fair, so I just ignore them all.
Yeah, and it must be a nice time to do FPL content. Do you know what? We don't have it on here, but on some of the other channels, you go on there and it shows like your live rank. That must be quite satisfying for you at the moment. You're 1.9k. Yeah, how have the last? Don't know, how have you got to there? Because I reckon even just like before we stopped this podcast, like you were behind me, Luke and Seb, but actually by quite a significant amount. And I remember you like worrying that you were going to have a bad season, and then you've had an insane particularly last like 5 or 6 game weeks. Is that right? Like, what's been the key things that have gone right during that time?
I don't know. It's just good luck, isn't it? Because looking at the season long graph on FPL Optimized, my like expected line has been like a steady gradient up, but my realized line was like below expected for a lot of the time, and then it suddenly shot up, and the gradient was so steep, and just showed how lucky I was getting. Yeah, it's been mainly good luck and consistent play, but like bad luck over the past couple of weeks is starting to have an effect. Like I made the gamble to attack two Liverpool players when they played Burnley before their double game week. I got Allison and Jota when I really should have just got one of them and saved my transfer and been cautious. But then I had to do Allison to Kelleher last week, and that meant I had to take a hit last week as well. And then I got Huang, and then yeah, a lot of people have suffered from the Huang situation, but
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Looking back on that, I guess we all bought him not knowing what was going to happen in game week 29. And at the moment we've now definitely got 4 fixtures in game week 29. But I guess we expected that, even though it was expected to be 4 if all the favourites won, the chances were that all the favourites wouldn't win, weren't they? So it felt like it was fairly low risk. Like the chances were we were going to have 5 or 6 fixtures in 29.
Yeah, most likely there were 5 fixtures. And when I was running Souls on review, I like put in this situation where all the favourites win, even though that was unlikely. I just ran it with this situation to see if it would still tell me to get Huang over Louise or Bowen, and Huang was still way ahead, even though he had one less fixture on that solve than Bowen and Louise. So I felt safe going for Huang. I didn't feel like it was much of a risk, and everyone else was doing it as well. So
yeah,
it
says a lot about how bad Sheffield United are, probably. To be honest,
because he was
one
level.
Of the main reasons.
He was top captaincy option level with Haaland and Saka.
Yeah, he was. And I've also had a pretty very lucky last kind of few months of FPL. I'm 4.8k now, so doing really well. But I guess when you get lucky and it happens to be in the double game weeks, that's where you've got super lucky, isn't it? Like for me, particularly with injuries. So for me, I didn't have Darwin Núñez, and he was like one of the biggest threats to my rank. Then he goes off injured. I had Diaz instead. Suddenly Diaz's minutes are probably higher in the second game. So yeah, when you get that luck, when it happens to align with the double game week and you get the knock-on effect of the second game, that's where you can be flying. So I got a lot of luck around that by having Diaz and not having Darwin, and then the same in the kind of City fixtures. I think didn't Foden and De Bruyne blank across both. I can't remember off the top of my head now. But I had Edison in goal, and he did really well across the 2 fixtures. Even though he got 1 clean sheet, he got 5 points in the other game. and had Alvarez as well, who got the assist for Haaland's goal in the second game. So I've had loads of things like go my way also, and yeah, my aim, I'd love to get another top 10. I've only finished in the top 10k once, which was a couple of seasons ago. I finished 1.8k. Yeah, I think my aim is just to finish in the top 10k again. If I could do that, I'd be delighted. And yeah, it's probably worth shouting out Luke and Seb as well. Like, they're both having really good seasons as well. Luke's 2.7k. He's been ahead of the rest of us for most of the season, actually, until you've overtaken him recently. And Seb's 17.4k. Again, like, really, really good season. I think he's probably only 15 points behind me or something. And all quite different routes to get there. I think you guys all wildcarded in 8. But, Luke went without, and Seb went without Haaland for that period. You went with both. I waited to wildcard 17. So quite different routes to get there. But we're, all doing well. Probably all playing fairly well, but also all been very lucky so far, which is nice.
Yeah,
Really nice.
I think it's been a good season in general for analytics-based managers, like better than last year. So that just us four doing well is just like an example, a small sample size of the wider landscape.
I think the interesting thing as well is 2 seasons ago that was the case as well. So not last season, the season before, loads of analytics managers did really well, and there were loads of them finishing the top 10k, etc. Whereas it wasn't necessarily the case as much last year. So I wonder how much of that is like analytics improving in terms of better quality underlying data, a better quality, like review getting better essentially, and how much of it is just like analytics managers will generally do well, but it's a bit random each season how the luck goes, and this one happens to be a bit more of a lucky one. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe a bit of both.
Maybe. I'm not sure either. I started using review. I used my last season was the first full season using review. I first started using it in like game week 30 or 31 of the season before that. So it's almost coming like to the full 2 years of me using review. And I guess it has improved my play quite a bit, but I was getting decent finishes before then, but I've been more consistent. Like I broke into the top 1k this season, and I broke into the top 1k last season. They're the only 2 times I've been in the top 1k at all in the FPL history.
Only twice. That's pathetic. So this episode, for those of you listening, it's just going to be a Q&A episode, probably a shorter one than normal. If I'd really recommend listening to the podcast Ben did with I think Fantasy Football Hub yesterday, because he went through stuff in a lot of detail in terms of doubles, blanks, etc. This one's a bit more of a Q&A episode, so I'm just going to ask Ben 8 or 9 questions. I'll give my thoughts on those kind of things as well, and it'll be primarily around fixtures, and it's questions you've asked us. And my first question was going to be from me, and was going to be to Ben to say, like, how does he do it so consistently? I guess you've covered that a bit, but I guess I'm interested to know, you kind of touched on it there. Since you've started using review, like, how differently do you think you've played? You said you think it's improved your play, but are there any things like you're really obviously doing differently in terms of, for example, number of hits you take, or how you choose captaincy, or anything like that? Is there anything really obvious, or do you think before that you were playing quite like a analytics manager, maybe, without realising it in some ways?
I think I was playing like an analytics manager without realising it, because I managed to qualify for, Simon does the analytics elite leagues, and I qualified for that division last year without having had a full season of review yet. So I was probably playing quite sharply, but it has sharpened my play being on review. Definitely. I don't know exactly what I'm doing well. Like I'm quite new to using review, and yet I'm still getting pretty good MD ranks, the underlying rankings, and I don't know what I'm doing better than people. I think I must be getting some, like, it shows you how lucky you're getting on review, but I must be getting like the unmeasurable luck as well, like the injuries and stuff that it can't even measure. I must be getting lucky like that as well.
Yeah, there can't just be random stuff like that, can't there? For example, if you own Bowen last week, for example, like, and he scores a hat trick, like, that's lucky. But even owning a player like Haaland and he scores a hat trick is always lucky by definition, because you never expect a player to score a hat trick. But those kind of things, I guess, we maybe don't think of those things as much when we think of luck, because we think, oh, it's Haaland, of course he can score a hat trick. And I think those are the kind of things I've realised that analytics accounts for, that helps me to understand when I've been lucky or unlucky. If I pick a player who's a really good pick and they score a hat trick, I don't think of that automatically in my head, or that was pretty lucky, because in my head they were a good pick. Whereas I tend to think of like the injuries, basically. and how double game weeks fall. They're the more obvious things, but I think analytics helps us to understand just game week by game week just how many small elements there are of luck there are within every single game within a game week. Great. So we'll just go straight into some questions. So I guess as a brief summary, we for people who are really out the loop, we've now got the confirmed fixtures for double game week 29, which is 4 fixtures that are taking place: Villa, West Ham, Brentford, Burnley, Fulham, Spurs, and Luton, Nottingham Forest. So only 4 fixtures there, but 4 not particularly exciting fixtures. We've got the double in game week 28 that we already knew about, with Bournemouth playing Luton, so both those teams doubling. And then later down the line in game week 34 and 37, there's 2 potential doubles / maybe blanks as well in those game weeks as well. So in relation to that, the first question from Kokosh on Twitter says, if you can get to 8 blank game week 29 players without any hits, does free hits still make sense? And probably a good one for you to answer, Ben, because I think you were or are in a similar position to this when we were chatting before the podcast.
We were both in the similar situation before Richarlison's injury. I could get to 8 and you could get to 8, but one of my 8 was Charlie Taylor, so it was like 7.5. But you were 8 good players, so I was more on the borderline, and I think you were going to try and not free hit a wild card. But now that we've lost Richarlison, I can only get to 7. One of them includes Charlie Taylor, and I've got a weak team for this week. I think I just have to commit to the free hit 29 plan. I mean, wildcarding is an option for me this week, but I think free hit 29 is better.
Yeah, I think, as you've touched on there, ultimately it doesn't just depend on the players, it depends on the quality of those players. So I think if you can get to 8 still, even with the Richarlison injury, so for example, if you didn't own him and you sold, let's say you had Richarlison and Palmer last game week and you sold Richarlison, and you can get to 8 without a hit, I think it's still viable because, for example, the one you could tie that in with getting Luton players, and you're not only taking a hit, but you're taking a hit and gaining 2 extra fixtures on a lot of players or on the player you're transferring out. Although Luton might not sound that appetising, I think they're the players you ultimately have to target if you go for that strategy. And it might be that you go for Kaminsky or Morris or Doty. So that's the route you go down. I think it is viable depending on your team, and another benefit of that in game week 29 is your team will probably be fairly good for 30, because the chances are to have a team good enough to not free hit in 29, you probably have triple Spurs already, and in 30 I think they play Luton, do they? Is that right? 30. Yeah, they play Luton in 30, so that's really nice. And the chances are also in 29, particularly if you plan to not free hit 29 but wildcard 31, in 29 you can transfer out Haaland, for example, or even in 28, and transition to Salah then really easily in 30, where other managers might not be able to do that, and he's a potential captain against Brighton. Also, maybe in 29, in order to get those extra players that you need, maybe you transfer out an Arsenal player, and again you avoid the Arsenal-Man City fixture in 30. So I think it's in general a very viable strategy, and potentially viable if you can get to 8 with no hits. I think anything below that is a struggle, and that's where I'm at. Yeah, I had 8 with no hits, and was planning, with the plan I had, it was to get 9 for a -4, maybe 10 for a -8. But now it's the fact I'm taking those extra hits, but it's also the fact that, there's the uncertainty between now and then. I guess if suddenly a couple more players get injured, then I'm pretty screwed. And then I've missed out on the opportunity to attack 28 as well, and not got Bournemouth players, and it's too late.
Yeah, I think if I was going to be going towards the no free hit in 29 route, I was eyeing up like a -8 next week of 3 Man City players to 3 Luton players, which would have seemed a bit extreme at the start of the season, but it would have made sense for my team.
Yeah, I was one of mine was I was going to sell Haaland next week potentially, or in 29, and then in 30 I was going to do Ross Barkley to Salah, which would just been an epic free transfer. So I really wanted to do it just so I could do Ross Barkley to Salah as my one transfer. Just would have felt like a baller move. But yeah, I think that plan's out the window for me now. So I guess in summary it depends on the players you have. But there are potentially lots of benefits to that. If you can get 8 for free still, and you don't have Richarlison, for example, already, that could be great. Next question, Ben. Who are the most likely double game week 34 teams? And are there going to be other possible small double game weeks as well outside of that? I'll just move to the next graphic actually that I think shows the probabilities.
Yeah. So I've just updated this spreadsheet based on the odds have changed a bit. I think Man United's odds of beating Liverpool have shortened a bit. So we've got the most likely teams to double in 34. Sheffield United versus Burnley and Man United. So you wouldn't want any of their players. Crystal Palace, 2 home games against West Ham and Newcastle. That's a 70% chance of a double. Bournemouth is interesting. They're about 60% to double. And that would be Villa and Wolves. And so that would be helpful for people who are free hitting in 29 because you can get your 3 Bournemouth players maybe for their double game week and then hope that they double in 34. Because like the one issue if you're free hitting in 29 is bridging the gap from now to double game week 34. You don't want to have 0 double game week 34 players in your team by game week 30 and then having to panic and bring in loads with hits and stuff. You want to set yourself up a little bit. Other teams, I mean, Man United and Newcastle, they're around 40% of doubling then. This is just based on my approximations and a few other people like Talia and people on the Discord. So it could go in a number of ways. Like in the FA Cup quarterfinals, if Liverpool lose to Man United, then they have a good chance of doubling in 34. If Wolves lose to Coventry, they'd have a good chance of doubling. So a lot of it is dependent on the results in the quarterfinals.
Something that's quite nice as well that I've just picked up in there from you saying that is particularly with Newcastle, their lead into game week 34 is fairly nice. West Ham at home, Everton at home, Fulham away, Tottenham at home. It's not terrible at all. It's fine. So if you're not free hitting 34 and you're free hitting 29, I guess those are some players you target there if that looks like it's going to happen. And then immediately after they've got Sheffield United. So that would almost be frustrating if you were free hitting them in and you didn't get them before that. And then suddenly you lose those players for when they play Sheffield United. United's fixtures aren't as good prior to that potential double. But again, they've got Burnley straight afterwards at home. So I guess that's, if that fixture does fall there, that'll be really nice for people not free hitting 34.
Yeah, and it's the opposite for Palace because they could have a really good double game week in 34 of West Ham and Newcastle both at home, but then they play Man City, Liverpool just before that double game week. So you might be looking to transfer in Palace players in 34, and that might benefit people free hitting in that week because they can get triple Palace.
Yeah, that's lovely actually, isn't it? For people who are definitely free hitting 34, they'll want that one to fall. Yeah. So much like depends on uncertainty still, doesn't it? Like if we knew specifically what fixtures, it'd be so easy just to use review, solve everything with the fixtures as 100% chance of being there, and you would look at EV and you would know, right, this is my best route quite clearly. But that's the interesting thing at the moment is that we're balancing what comes out best in terms of the expected value, but actually how much value do you credit to uncertainty, the potential for things to go wrong. There's just so much more to take into account than that, and there's a lot of subjectivity to it as well. What about the second half of that question, Ben, around other fixtures maybe outside of that 34 and 37? We can move on to 37, can't we?
There's a slim chance in 35, a decent chance in 35 or 36 that Chelsea will probably double. I've got it as an 80% chance of them getting a double game week in 35 or 36. I think 36 would be more likely. And it'll either be Chelsea, Tottenham or Brighton, Chelsea, probably. Maybe an outside chance of Arsenal, Chelsea moving there to 35 or 36. And it's kind of dependent a bit on how Brighton do in the Europa League. So we might get some clues about that if they were to lose like heavily away at Roma this coming week. Then the chances will shift a bit for who could double in that week. I think Brighton Chelsea would be more likely to move to 36 if that happens. And then that could shift other things around on the projections. It's all quite fluid and difficult to predict at the minute.
That's interesting because I thought when I looked at review, I thought the likelihood of the fixture being in 35 and 36 was a bit lower than that. But maybe that's not been updated, or maybe that's just a different opinion. And I listened to the podcast that Planet FPL did with James and Sudge. And James went through all that in so much detail in terms of European fixtures, how that influences things, and there's so much to account for. Like again, I guess it's fairly subjective, but yeah, 80% is pretty. That's really interesting, actually. Very interesting.
Yep. So Chelsea, I've got them as 100% chance of doubling in 37, and then they've got like a 70 an 80% chance of doubling in 35 or 36. So everyone will have triple Chelsea by then, because I don't think anyone's going to free hit in 37, or very few people. So it'll just be like triple Chelsea that for the end of the season, I think, for everybody.
Yes, yeah, and in 34 we could also have a blank game week. Fulham Liverpool, but fairly unlikely.
Yeah, Fulham. Well, that's the question. Is like, where does Everton, Liverpool move to? Because I think James and I and a lot of the other people who predict fixture movements were kind of fairly sure that they prefer to move Everton, Liverpool to game week 34, because it would be like Everton's last home game if they played it in game week 37, and like maybe the police wouldn't want that. But then, like, I think James heard from someone that he trusts that they're looking at moving it to 37. And if that happens, then I think Fulham would blank. Yeah, Fulham is the team would be most likely to blank. But I've currently got Everton Liverpool as 50-50 as whether it's going to move to 34, 37. It's like, maybe the TV companies, maybe they would rather have Everton Liverpool in the final week because it's such a big game and it could affect the title race and the relegation zone.
Yeah,
so you have to balance, like, when you're predicting things, like, do the TV companies win? Does the Premier League win? Like, whose opinion holds more weight? It's hard to predict these things.
Is it all quite political, Ben? Like behind the scenes with the TV companies?
I don't know. I'd like to see what happens behind the scenes, but I'm not really sure. But I think the TV companies often get what they want, unless it's like really unreasonable, unless like someone's going to complain about that. I think that they normally get what they want.
So the Premier League haven't contacted you yet to get involved in these meetings?
No.
Maybe eventually. What are the most likely? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I guess that just gives people an overview of kind of the big picture, particularly for those who are out of the loop as well. A really good question, like this next one, because a lot of people are potentially going to wildcard in 31, people who aren't free hitting in 29, free hit 34, and then bench boost 37. So this is from Sue Check Yourself. Great name. Any worries that a 31 wildcard and a late bench boost in 37 is too risky due to each club's status, player rotation / rest? So I guess this is like whether they've got anything to play for with those last 2 game weeks, therefore rotation, but also things like injuries that can happen between in that period when you're not bench boosting immediately after you wildcard. Would you have any concerns there, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the downsides to wildcarding then. But every strategy has a downside, has positives and negatives, and you just have to weigh them up and maybe use FPL review to see which is the best one for you. I think when running souls on review, you have to like use binary options and like put in a certain set of results, try it with that, and then put a different set of like binaries in, and then try it with that, and keep trying it. And it's a lot of work. If you've got a close decision, then it's a lot of work. I just ran a solve like on maybe the most likely set of binary fixtures for my own team, and the free hit 29 route was like 6 EV ahead. So I don't feel like I have to do much more research. I think that's kind of like the obvious play for me now. But so some people are wildcarding this week. Then it's even more of a challenge to get to bench boost 37. Like, at least if you're wildcarding in 31, you're a bit closer to 37. But I don't know how many people are going to be in the wildcard 31 camp now, now that the Richarlison's out and there's players are dropping like flies who are fit in 29.
Do you know people who are wildcarding this week, Ben, or next week? Will most of them set up to not free hit in 29?
Yeah, I think that's that if you're wildcarding this week or next week, I think you're looking to free hit in 34. I haven't seen many people talk about wildcard 27-8 and free hit 29 because it leaves you exposed to 34 and 37 because they're going to be different teams doubling in those. I mean, if Chelsea had got a difficult FA Cup draw, then you would have thought Chelsea are going to double in both 34 and 37. But they got an easy draw. They got Leicester at home, and so it looks like there'll be no teams doubling in both 34 and 37.
Yeah.
So you want a different team for both. What else was I going to say? I had a thought. It's just escaped me now. So we can move on to the next question.
My main thought on that was basically it must, for people who are wildcarding this week or next week. I don't know whether it's tricky to like sort that transition between 28 and 29 because obviously it's fine for Luton players, but part of me thinks because you're wildcarding so early, like, do you really want to commit to now you have 3 Luton players in your team and you're gonna have to transfer them out rather than wildcard out of it? And with Bournemouth players, if you go triple Bournemouth for their double, they then all 3 of them blank then the next week. So it must be a bit of a fine line to navigate, I guess, for people with that strategy.
Yeah, on the solve that I just ran, where it was wildcarding this week with a free hit in 34, it only had 1 Luton player in my team in game week 29. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I think I'd just have Doherty.
So
But
start
it-
with
it is
two for the double and then takes one out straight immediately for the next game week.
No,
or just starts
it
with one?
just has 1 for the double,
Yeah.
which is a bit curious. But it's
Mm.
it's because it needs to leave your team in a good enough shape for all the single game weeks leading up to 37 and then game week 37 itself as well. So you don't want to be filling your team with Luton players. I don't think.
Based on those solves you've run for wildcarding this week or next, is that a potential for you, Ben, or have you kind of ruled that out based on the results of it?
Well, I was thinking it might be an option after Richarlison's injury, but with Richarlison being out, I can just take the hit for a Bournemouth player this week instead of next week and continue with the free hit 29 plan. But like I did have to run another solve just to check there was still a big enough gap in EV between wildcarding now or free hitting in 29. And like I said, it's a 7 EV gap. The free hit 29 is 7 EV better for me. But for some people, it'll be different. And some people, wildcarding is more viable this week.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting. And it's just good when the game's at this point where you've got loads of different strategies and they're all viable. It makes it all way more interesting because there definitely have been like seasons in the past where I've played the game and before I knew you, Ben, it would get to this period and I would look at your Twitter and it would be like, right, this is the clear way to play the game. And it's not very team dependent. This season it makes sense. Whereas this season it does feel like in general is way more team dependent than it is even normally. And I guess it has been the past 2 seasons because of random cancellations with like royalty dying and COVID as well. But this season like should be a normal season, but actually it feels more team dependent than normal. Well, that's what it feels like to me anyway. Do you think that's the case?
It did feel like that yesterday. There was kind of like an even split between the 3. There were 3 like chip strategy options. Have I gone through them all? I think I've said them all. Like one of them is the wildcard 30 free hit, 34 bench boost 37. The other one is free hit 29, wildcard 35, and the other one was wildcarding early and free hitting in 34. So wildcarding this week, and they were all kind of like people were going for all of them. But now with Richarlison being out, I think there's way fewer people now who are looking to tackle game week 29 without a free hit or a wildcard beforehand. So I think there's a much bigger camp now of people who are looking to free hit in 29 and wildcard in 35. That's become more solid over the course of the week.
It's still interesting though, and there'll be lots of routes from there as well, and there'll be more uncertainty with how the doubles fall in 34 and 37 as well. So that's really good. Good question though about the bench boost later in the season. This next question is really good. How much? I've not actually written down who sent this question. I'll have a look once I've read it out. How much EV would you place on the info we're going to receive about game week 34 and 37? For me, this is what this person says. For me, free hit 29, wildcard 30 is 3 to 5 EV worse than wildcard 27, free hit 29. But that's based on fixture probabilities rather than actuals. So which is actually better? So how much value we touched on it briefly earlier, how much value do you actually put on that uncertainty? Or how much value does that remove in some situations? Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Ben?
It's hard to compare. Like running it on probabilities maybe is a problem because I think it's been covered in other podcasts. You want to run it in binary, so it would show your transfers as they definitely would be. If you only give a fixture a 50% chance of happening, then it wouldn't transfer in that player. It would like ignore that player almost. So you want to run it in binaries, then compare all your plans, and then see if you like if you're on average about 3 or 5 EV worse, then you save your wild card and you gain the EV later. If there's a big gap like what I've got, which is 7 EV of a gap, then I think the wild card it won't cover that gap for me, and better just going with the 3-hit plan. But it's hard. It's really hard to. I think Sertlap has got his solver where he makes it a lot easier, but I'm too stupid to work out how to work that. I
Can't read the
can't
code.
understand all the code, and I wish I could because it would make it a lot easier.
I can't either. So I actually posted this question in one of our like analytics chats to get other people's opinions on it because I didn't really wasn't really sure how to approach it. And this guy JC replied, who was on that latest podcast with Sertalp, and he said, we don't actually often reach the top line, or at least the top line itself changes quite quickly. I would say it's worth doing some robustness testing, see how early wildcard holds up. If fixtures end up in a different scenario than the main one, wildcard 30 should know that info, but some fixture scenarios will be less fruitful. Seeing how much early wildcard drops off versus struggles in certain scenarios should give you an idea of how much the info value of waiting is, i.e. if it withstands lots of different scenarios with minimal EV loss, then info value of waiting is lower and vice versa. I had to read that several times before I got my head around it, but essentially because there's lots of unknown information, if you're using review and you apply, particularly with key fixtures, a value of 1 to their certainty rather than having them as a probability, and you do that for various different scenarios, you'll, I guess, be able to paint a bit more of a picture of what the optimal strategy is based on various different outcomes and how robust your strategy will be if certain things do or don't go certain ways. So I guess how high risk your strategy is, you'll get an idea of that, and that helps you to paint a picture there. There's a lot of subjectivity in it, but I thought that was a really good response. A lot of it, you might run a lot of those solves and realize actually this strategy is best for my team, but actually it's high risk because if this particular fixture doesn't fall, then it suddenly becomes way worse. But I don't know, some people might be okay with that, other people might not be.
Yeah, and there's the nightmare situation for people who wildcard in 31 is that there are no double game weeks in game week 34, or there's only like 1 or 2 people double game week with a double game week, because there's a chance that all the game week 34 postponements just move to the midweek in 34. It's like it's unlikely, but it's possible. And then you'd be really regretting if you were taking hits now to get ready for game week 29 and try and prepare for that with the wild card in 31 and the free hit ready to use in 34, and then 34 becomes nothing, and you just then you free hit in game week 38 and hope to gain some advantage from all the rotation in 38. But that would be the nightmare situation.
Yes. Yeah, great. We'll move on to, we've only got a few questions left, so we're nearly there. Really simple one. If you're wildcarding this week, Ben, would you have Haaland in your team?
That's a difficult question, isn't it? Let's see what. I think Review on its latest solve has said that I would have Haaland, and I would hold Haaland all the way through if I was. Yeah, I think it's saying the front line on a wild card is Haaland, Watkins, Solanke. So I think when I ran solves last night, there was no Haaland in my team. But now it's saying on a wild card I would have him. So
it might depend on things like team value as well. So when I ran a solve with wildcard this week and then free hit 34, and it had Haaland from the beginning and then a transition to switching him to Salah in game week 30 and then getting him back by game week 34. Sorry, and then you didn't need to get him back by 34 because you were free hitting it in case Man City played double there. It wouldn't matter because you're free hitting it. But I think also that might be my team value. My team value is extremely low. It's like 102.7 or something, and some people are like, I think Luke's is like 107. Most people are like 104, 105. So that might be a team value thing for me. It suggested start with him, then switch to Salah. But yeah, one thing's for certain is that you definitely need a route to get Salah from game week 30. I think he becomes higher priority, but ideally you have both from then.
I think for me, I might have to just, if I'm free hitting in 29, I think I'd just fade Salah and hope he doesn't hurt me too much in 30. Well, it depends on the double game weeks, but I think it has me going to Salah in game week 31 in that. So it'd be scary not owning Salah in 30 against Brighton.
Yeah, completely. Great. Just a few more questions. That last question was from the Blues FPL, and the question before that, I looked it up. It was from. I've lost it again. I'll try and find it again. So this next question from Erland Sviland. Would you think a game without wildcards and free hits would be to your benefit? This is the third season in a row where I think I would be better off compared to my mini league rivals without one, even if this stage of the season is where I gain the most on them. Yeah, what do you think about that? Would the game be harder or easier without chips, do you think?
I think it wouldn't be to my benefit. I think since the chips were introduced, my ranks have been much better. I think it adds an extra level of strategy to it and creates more hard decisions. And the more hard decisions you've got throughout the season, the more like chances you've got to gain on the people who might not make those decisions as well as you might not do as good a job with those hard decisions. So yeah, I don't know if it's because I started taking the game more seriously when the chips were introduced that my rank started getting better, or if it's, I don't know, but I think I've definitely appreciated the chips being introduced in FPL.
Yeah, I kind of think my overall rank would probably be better. Yeah, it's better with chips, but I think if there weren't chips, I think in terms of engaged players, there'd be like a real benefit to analytics in the sense of that long-term planning would be even more important because you don't have particularly the wild card. You don't have like that kind of like get out of jail free card if you're like struggling. So that's the one where I think actually if there was only one wild card all season, for example, and long-term planning was more valuable, I think that would be interesting. Or say we had like less transfers, for example, again that long-term planning becomes more valuable. But maybe then there's more variance involved in the game as well. I'm not sure. But yeah, certainly an interesting one, and it'd be an interesting question to ask someone who plays the Sky game maybe, because they have overhauls, don't they? But they have to be in a certain game week, so you don't get to gain the advantage of planning when you play it. Interesting one to ask Luke, who's doing very well in Sky, I believe, this season. The two really straightforward questions to finish. That great question earlier was from Overnight Success FPL. Two to finish from Evor FPL. Ben, how will you celebrate if you get top 1k for the first time?
I don't know. I'll just be happy. I won't do anything special. I'll obviously post a kind of braggy post on Twitter, and people will accuse me of bragging, but I will be happy. But it's not the be all and end all. And I wouldn't be devastated if I don't make it.
No. Okay. Yeah. So your heart's not set on it. I would. I think you should do something to celebrate. You should at least someone should buy you some champagne or something. Been a long time coming.
I'll see people the following weekend at game week 39. Get the Birmingham thing.
Yeah.
So that'd be good.
Some in-person bragging as well. Great. And then I guess like a question we always do at the end is like captaincy for this week. We won't go through our team specifically for this week. I don't think people are particularly interested in that. And this says Saka, Haaland or Salah if fit. We know Salah's not fit. So are you captaining Haaland or Saka, Ben?
Haaland, I think. It looks like there's a big enough gap there. Last week it was a closer decision. I mean, like on paper, Saka looks really good, doesn't he? Because he's away at Sheffield United. But I don't know. Do you have vibes about the Manchester derby? Do you think Man United are going to do a good job defending Man City?
No, I don't have any vibes, but I think there's something in the fact it's a derby. I do think there's something in the fact that in terms of minutes that maybe like a player like Haaland, even if they're 3-0 up, or I just think he's more to play more minutes. Maybe I don't know, but that's just my perception. That might not be. There might not be any truth behind that at all. Last week it was like pretty much 50-50. it was actually my 30th last week, and it was like my 30th celebrations on the Saturday night, and it was 50-50 between the two, and I went for Haaland because I wanted to just not. I didn't want Haaland to score a hat trick when I hadn't captained him just before I'd celebrate my 30th, and it to impact my mood. If I didn't have that, maybe I'd have captained Saka. I don't know. I can't say for certain. It's very easy to say now that I would have done. I don't know. But this week, I think I'll captain Haaland. I think I've got their minutes slightly different as well on review compared to default, and have Haaland 0.3 EV ahead. So at the moment, that's fine. And we also tend to see Haaland, as you get nearer to the fixture, in terms of the market odds, he tends to get better for whatever reason as well. So I'll probably captain Haaland, but if you want to captain Saka, like, absolutely do it. It's definitely not a stupid captaincy goal, and even like Son's not even that far behind them this week. So if you really fancy taking a risk, and like you're chasing rank, for example, and you're miles off where you want to be, like, yeah, I definitely wouldn't put anyone off doing that. It's not a straightforward one. Great, and then that's all the questions we had. I just wanted to ask you, Ben, is like, has anything changed in terms of your plans over the last? You mentioned before the pod you'd run a couple of solves. Like, what is your plan at the moment, basically? If you had to guess what you're going to do,
it is to do Richarlison to Son instead of Hwang to Son, because Hwang could come in useful maybe next week even if he's fit. And then instead of taking a hit for Bournemouth player next week, I'll take one now, because if Solanke didn't start, then I'd be getting Charlie Taylor off the bench, which I don't want. So it's best to do Charlie Taylor to Senesi, and then I'll have to start 2 out of Senesi, Solanke, and Walker. Start 2 and bench 1, and I'll just have to make a decision on that. But it might end up benching Senesi, which is what review is saying.
Yeah.
But I'm taking the hit just to get coverage in case Solanke plays 0 minutes, and it's a hit that I'd be taking next week, so it's bringing the hit forward.
Yeah, that would be my instinct. Would be you take that hit, but you just bench them. I think it's fine. Yeah. I think at least you have that coverage because you might need the player anyway, and if it's a move you're definitely going to do next week anyway, which you know, the only risk is an injury or something, but you pretty much know that because of the double. I'd probably do that. I need to rethink my plan because I was really set on the plan of just getting through 29 without free hitting it, and that involved taking a -4 this week to bring in Son and to bring in Ross Barkley. But because I'm now free hitting 29, I need to run some solves and find out what I'm going to do. I think I'll probably end up buying Palmer. I think now I don't own him. I sold him last week, and because I'm now free hitting 29, I think that probably makes a lot of sense as well. Do you have Palmer, Ben?
I do, yeah. So
I think it makes sense. I just get him straight back in. To be honest, I think that might be the.
Has he got really good fixtures?
He's got Brentford, Newcastle, Burnley the next 3, which is pretty good. He's just a great asset, isn't he? On penalties, pretty much 90 minutes.
And you don't think like Tavernier with like a double game week and then maybe a double game week in 34, you could have like 2 more fixtures than Palmer. But I suppose Palmer's nailed on and Tavernier doesn't start every game, so.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I've not thought about the fact that I need to. Maybe I'll end up getting Son instead, and Son and Tavernier, and taking -4. Who knows? I need to kind of look at and where my team looks now in terms of injuries, because I'll just have a quick look at it now. Yeah, in terms of this week now. Yeah, if I don't do anything, I'll be starting Solanke. There's no guarantee he plays. I'll be starting Pal Torres. There's no guarantee he plays. I've then got Doty first sub I don't particularly want to play. So I can probably just get away with 1 transfer. I'm starting Bruno Fernandes at the moment. So yeah, I think maybe a -4 this week instead of next week might make sense as well. Yeah, maybe I'll go for the Son and Tavernier, however you say it. Go for that route rather than just going to Palmer. Yeah, I'll have a look at it. Great. Have you got anything else to add, Ben, or should we end the pod there?
I think that's everything. Yeah,
it's been good. Great. It's been good fun to be back. We don't know how regularly we're going to do the pod now. We're just going to play it a bit by ear, hopefully more regularly from now until the end of the season. Thanks very much for joining me, Ben. Really appreciate it. And yeah, really appreciate you guys who listen. Hope you enjoyed the episodes. And yeah, good luck with all your planning. Have a good game week.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me, Sam. It's been good.
No worries, mate. Bye, everyone.